For 5 hours she said nothing. She sat still, eyes closed, hands folded, breathing slow. Then the plane shook hard. She opened her eyes and spoke one sentence to the cockpit. 2 F-22 pilots heard that sentence and froze. What she said should not have come from a woman marked dead. The flight was Sky Bridge 412, a regional jet flying from Anchorage to Seattle on a cold November evening. It was a small plane, only 74 seats, half empty because of the weather warnings that morning. The woman boarded last, wearing a plain gray coat and carrying nothing but a small backpack. She did not check any bags. She gave the gate agent a ticket under the name Rachel Dunn and walked to her seat without looking at anyone. Rachel Dunn had brown hair tied back tight, no makeup, and tired eyes that gave nothing away. She looked like any tired traveler going home. The flight attendant offered her water once. She only gave a small nod, no words, and that was how she answered every question for the next 5 hours. She read no book, watched no movie, used no phone. She simply sat, her eyes half closed, listening. What nobody on that plane knew was that Rachel Dunn was not her real name. Her real name had not appeared on any flight, any hotel form, or any government record in 11 months. The last time it appeared was on a memorial plaque at a small base in Alaska, next to the words "Killed in Action." The woman everyone believed was buried under that name was sitting in seat 19C, listening to the engines the way a doctor listens to a heartbeat. She had been an Air Force pararescue specialist once, the kind of soldier who jumped into storms and war zones to save downed pilots. Her call sign, back when she was allowed to have one, was Falcon 9. Nobody used that name anymore. It had been retired along with her file, closed and locked after a mission in the mountains that went wrong in ways the official report never explained. She had walked away from that report with a new name and a promise to never speak of her old life again. 3 hours into the flight, she noticed something. A small shake in the floor under her feet, gone in 2 seconds, then back again 5 minutes later, a little longer this time. Most passengers would call it turbulence and forget it. She did not forget it. She counted the seconds between each shake, the way she had been trained to count seconds between gunfire, between explosions, between heartbeats. In the cockpit, Captain Owen Reyes and First Officer Priya Shah were watching a small warning light that had just turned yellow. Left engine vibration was rising slowly, not fast enough to be an emergency yet, but enough to make Reyes frown. He had flown for 18 years and learned to trust small warnings before they became big ones. Probably a sensor, Shah said, checking the backup readings. Everything else is normal. Keep watching it, Reyes said. He did not feel good about it, but he had no proof yet, only a feeling. Back in the cabin, the shaking came a third time, stronger, and this time it lasted almost 4 full seconds. The woman in 19C sat up straight. Her hands moved to the armrests, not from fear but from habit, the same way a driver grips the wheel before a sharp turn. She looked toward the front of the plane and then toward the emergency exits on both sides, counting rows, counting seconds, doing math nobody else on the plane was doing. A young man in the seat next to her noticed her sudden stillness. "You okay?" he asked. She did not answer. Her eyes stayed fixed on the front of the plane, and she gave no sign she had even heard him. 5 minutes later, the plane dropped. Not a small bump, but a real drop, the kind that makes stomachs rise and cups fly off trays. People screamed. A bag fell from the overhead bin. The seatbelt sign turned on with a sharp, urgent tone, different from the usual soft chime. In the cockpit, 3 new warning lights appeared at once. Hydraulic pressure was falling. The left engine temperature was climbing fast. Reyes felt the controls grow heavy under his hands, slow to respond, like pushing through thick mud. Denver Center, Sky Bridge 412, declaring an emergency, Shah said into the radio, her voice tight but steady. "We have hydraulic and engine issues, request immediate vectors to the nearest suitable airport." The ground controller answered fast, clearing airspace, calling for emergency crews, and reaching out to the nearest military base for help, since the weather made civilian airports risky that night. 2 F-22 fighter jets were already in the air nearby on a training flight. They were ordered to break off and escort the wounded airliner down. The lead pilot, call sign Marlin, brought his jet close enough to see the airliner shaking in the wind. Sky Bridge 412, Marlin flight, we have you visual. Looks like fluid streaking along your left wing route. How copy? Copy, Marlin, Reyes answered. We see hydraulic pressure dropping fast. Controls are getting heavy. Inside the cabin, the woman in 19C unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up before the flight attendant could stop her. She walked to the front with steady steps despite the shaking floor, the same balance she once used running across cracked ice and broken rock under gunfire. Ma'am, please sit down, the flight attendant said, grabbing her arm. The woman did not argue. She simply looked at the flight attendant with such calm certainty that the hand on her arm loosened on its own. Something in that single look made the flight attendant step back and let her pass. She walked to the cockpit door and knocked 3 times, sharp and clear. Reyes ignored it at first, too busy fighting the controls. She knocked again, harder. Captain, you have a cracked line feeding your backup hydraulic system, a calm voice said through the small crack the flight attendant had opened. That is why your controls feel slow instead of dead. Close the crossfeed valve on your left panel now, or you will lose pitch control in the next few minutes. Reyes turned, shocked that a passenger knew the exact name of a valve buried deep in the aircraft system. He looked at Shaw. Shaw nodded, unsure but out of better options. Reyes reached up and closed the valve. Slowly, the heaviness in the controls eased. Not gone, but better, enough that the plane stopped drifting sideways on its own. Let her in, Reyes said. The cockpit door opened. The woman stepped inside, eyes scanning every gauge in one sweep, the way a person reads a page they have read 1,000 times before. Your left engine is going to overheat within 10 minutes if you don't reduce thrust and shift fuel flow now, she said. I will tell you the numbers. Trust me or don't, but you don't have time to check. Reyes trusted her. He adjusted the thrust exactly as she said. The engine temperature, which had been climbing toward the red line, slowly leveled off. Outside, Marlin and his wingman, call sign Otter, kept close formation with the shaking jet, watching for smoke or fire. Marlin's radio picked up the strange calm voice coming from inside the airliner, giving technical directions with the confidence of a flight engineer, not a scared passenger. Otter, run that voice through recognition, Marlin said quietly on their private channel. That's not normal passenger talk. That sounds trained. It took less than a minute. When the result came back, Otter's voice changed. Marlin, you need to hear this. Voice match, 92%, call sign Falcon 9. That's not possible, Marlin said. Falcon 9 died last year. I flew cover at that memorial flyover myself. I'm looking at the match right now, Otter said. 92% confidence, and the file is locked with special access only. Both pilots went quiet for a long moment, staring at the shaking airliner ahead of them, understanding that the ghost they thought they buried might be flying the plane home right now. Inside the cockpit, the woman guided Reyes through the final approach step by step, telling him when to lower the landing gear, how wide to bank the turn, how much runway to expect to use because of the damaged controls. Her voice never rose, never shook, even as the runway lights grew close through the windshield. The landing was hard, the wheels slamming down with a jolt that rattled the whole cabin, but the plane held together and rolled to a stop with runway still left to spare. For a moment nobody in the cockpit moved. Then Shaw began to cry with relief, and Reyes let out a breath he had been holding since the first warning light appeared. By the time emergency crews reached the plane, the woman was gone from the cockpit, back in her seat, already moving toward the exit slide with the other passengers, blending into the crowd the way she had trained to disappear for years. Marlin brought his jet low over the runway one last time before turning back toward base, staring down at the small crowd of survivors standing safely on the tarmac. Somewhere in that crowd was a woman the Air Force had buried, a woman who was supposed to be gone, who had just saved 74 lives without giving her real name to a single person on board. He keyed his radio to report what he and Otter had heard, knowing the answer would raise questions nobody on base was ready to answer. Because if Falcon 9 was alive, then somebody had lied about her death, and that meant the story was far from over. On the ground, ambulances and fire trucks surrounded the plane, lights spinning red and white across the wet runway. Passengers stood in small shaking groups, wrapped in blankets, some crying, some laughing from pure relief. Reyes stepped off the plane last, his legs still weak from the landing, and looked around for the quiet woman who had saved them all. He wanted to shake her hand, to ask her name, to understand how a stranger knew his aircraft better than he did. But she was already gone, swallowed into the crowd of passengers being led toward the terminal buses, her gray coat blending with a dozen others just like it. A young base security officer named Corporal Ellis walked the length of the crowd with a photograph on his tablet, comparing faces one by one, following orders that had come down fast and quiet from someone high above his pay grade. He checked face after face, finding nothing. When he reached the last bus, it was already pulling away, tail lights fading into the dark highway beyond the airport fence. He radioed back that the search had come up empty. 2 hours later, in a small office at the base, Marlon sat across from a woman in a plain black suit who introduced herself only as Agent Reyna. She did not smile. She asked him to repeat every word he had heard over the radio, every detail of the voice, every second of hesitation before Reyes opened that cockpit door. Marlon answered as best he could, though part of him still could not believe what the system had told him. If she's alive, Marlon finally asked, why would the Air Force say she died? Agent Reyna closed her folder without answering. That, she said quietly, is exactly what I intend to find out. Outside, the storm that had grounded half the flights that night was finally clearing, leaving a sky full of cold, sharp stars, and somewhere beneath them, a woman who was supposed to be dead kept walking, alone, into the dark.